The discovery. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cool metal wall of the research station orbiting Kepler 442b, trying to steady her trembling hands. The data streams flowing across her holographic displays showed something that shouldn't exist, something that challenged every fundamental principle the Galactic Council had taught humanity about their place in the universe. For 3 years, Elena had been conducting genetic research under the Council's strict oversight, mapping human DNA sequences alongside samples from the 47 known sentient species. It was routine work, cataloging the vast differences that separated humanity from their galactic neighbors. The Council had made it clear from first contact, humans were unique, yes, but also primitive. Their genetic structure was simple, their evolutionary path unremarkable. But the sample that arrived that morning changed everything. "Computer, run comparative analysis again," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible in the sterile laboratory. "Cross-reference human genome sequence 7.4 with all known precursor fragments." The AI's synthesized voice filled the chamber. "Analysis complete. Genetic sequence shows 97.3% compatibility with archived precursor DNA fragments. Probability of random occurrence, less than 0.0001%. Elena's legs gave out, and she collapsed into her chair. The precursors were legend, myth, the stuff of ancient stories told across 100 worlds. They were the vanished race that had supposedly seeded the galaxy with life billions of years ago, before disappearing without a trace. No complete precursor genetic material had ever been found, only fragments embedded in the DNA of various species, usually comprising less than 2% of their genetic structure. But humans? Humans were supposedly precursor-free. The Council had tested them extensively during first contact 50 years ago. They'd found nothing unusual, nothing that would suggest humanity was anything more than another young species taking its first steps into the galactic community. The laboratory door hissed open, and Dr. Kethera, Elena's Zephyrian research partner, entered with her characteristic chittering sound that passed for excitement among her species. "Elena, you look pale. Even more pale than usual, which for a human is concerning." Kethera's forearms moved in complex patterns as she spoke, her crystalline exoskeleton catching the laboratory's artificial light. "The mineral analysis from the asteroid belt is complete, and we found traces of Kethera," Elena interrupted, her voice hollow. "I need you to look at something." The Zephyrian researcher moved to Elena's workstation, her compound eyes adjusting to examine the data streams. For several minutes, she remained silent, her arms gradually slowing their constant motion until they hung motionless at her sides. "This cannot be accurate," Kethera finally chittered. "Human genetic structure shows massive precursor integration. This suggests humans are not a naturally evolved species." Elena nodded grimly. "That's what I thought too. But I've run the analysis 17 times. The results are consistent. Look at chromosome 21, sequences 4400 through 4800. That's not just precursor DNA. That's a complete precursor memory storage system." "Memory storage?" Kethera's voice rose to a high pitch that indicated extreme distress in her species. "You mean?" "I mean humans aren't just related to the precursors. We are precursors. Or at least, we're their direct descendants, modified and placed on Earth with our memories suppressed." Elena pulled up another display showing brain scan comparisons. "Look at these neural pathway maps. Humans have dormant structures in their brains that match theoretical models of precursor consciousness architecture." Kethera's arms began moving again, but slowly, as if she were processing information too vast to comprehend. "Elena, do you understand what this means? If humans are precursor descendants, then every treaty, every trade agreement, every law the Council has imposed on humanity is based on false premises." "It means more than that," Elena said, her voice growing stronger as the implications became clear. "The precursors were the most advanced civilization the galaxy has ever known. They had technology that could manipulate spacetime itself, could seed entire star systems with life, could store consciousness in quantum matrices. If humans have that genetic heritage, then humans aren't a primitive species at all," Kethera finished. "They're potentially the most advanced species in the galaxy, just sleeping." Elena stood and began pacing the small laboratory. But, why? Why hide this? Why suppress human development for 50 years? The Council had to have known. Their genetic scans are too advanced to have missed something this obvious. As if summoned by her words, the laboratory's communication system activated. The three-dimensional projection of Counselor Vexhai materialized in the center of the room, his elongated Corthani features twisted into what Elena had learned to recognize as displeasure. Dr. Vasquez. Dr. Kethera. The counselor's voice carried the harmonic undertones that marked his species' speech. You are required to report to Council Station Omega immediately. Your research has been noticed. Elena's blood ran cold. Counselor, we've made some fascinating discoveries about human genetics that could. Dr. Vasquez. Vexhai's interruption was sharp, filled with authority that had governed galactic civilization for millennia. Pack only personal effects. All research data will remain on the station. A transport ship is already en route. The projection flickered and died, leaving Elena and Kethera alone with the weight of their discovery. They know, Kethera chittered softly. They've always known. Elena's mind raced. If the Council had hidden humanity's true nature for half a century, they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who discovered the truth. But, the implications went beyond personal safety. If humans were precursor descendants, then, every human on Earth was living a lie. They were being kept artificially primitive, their potential suppressed by the very organization that claimed to guide and protect them. Kethera, can you access the deep archives? The restricted Council databases? Theoretically, yes. My research clearance allows access to historical genetic records, but, do it. Search for any references to Project Tabula, human memory suppression protocols, or genetic masking procedures. If I'm right, there has to be a record somewhere. Kethera's arms moved rapidly across her control interface, her natural ability to interface directly with computer systems making the search far faster than any human could manage. Within minutes, her arms froze. Elena! I found something. Project Tabula Rasa. Initiated 53 years ago, 3 years before official first contact with humanity. What does it say? Species designation, Homo sapiens. Status, precursor inheritor species. Threat level, extinction class. Recommended action, genetic memory suppression, technological development limitation, cultural integration under Council oversight. Kethera's voice became smaller with each word. Elena, according to this, humans weren't just discovered by the Council. They were created by the Council. Elena felt the universe tilt around her. Created? Modified. The original human species on Earth was already a precursor inheritor, but they were developing too quickly. Their technology was advancing exponentially. Within a few generations, they would have rediscovered their precursor heritage naturally. So the Council intervened. How? Viral genetic modification. They released modified viruses into Earth's atmosphere that rewrote human DNA, suppressing the precursor sequences and limiting cognitive development. Then, they waited 50 years for the modifications to take full effect before making first contact. Elena's hands clenched into fists. 50 years of stolen potential. 50 years of keeping humanity ignorant of what we really are. She turned to face her friend. Kethera, how many humans do you think carry unsuppressed precursor genes? According to these records, maybe 1 in 10 million. The genetic suppression wasn't perfect. Some humans retain fragments of their original coding. And those humans? Are monitored closely. Any who show signs of awakening their precursor abilities are recruited for special Council projects. Elena's blood turned to ice. Or eliminated. The laboratory's door chimed, indicating an incoming transport. Through the viewport, Elena could see the sleek lines of a Council enforcement vessel approaching the station. In less than an hour, she would be aboard that ship, traveling to a Council facility where inconvenient discoveries disappeared along with the people who made them. Kethera, I need you to do something for me. Something that could get you executed if you're caught. Her friend's compound eyes fixed on her with unwavering attention. I need you to copy all of this data and transmit it to Earth. Not to the Council-approved channels, but to the underground networks. The humans who question the official story of First Contact, the ones who've noticed the inconsistencies in Council doctrine. Elena, that would be treason against the Council. My species would be expelled from the galactic community. Your species deserves to know the truth too. Look at the data again, Cathera. Search for Zephyrian genetic records. Cathera's arms moved reluctantly across the interface. After several minutes, she made a sound Elena had never heard before, a deep harmonic wail that seemed to come from the core of her being. No, they didn't. What percentage of Zephyrian DNA is precursor? 43%. We're inheritors too. But our memory suppression is even more complete than humanity's. Cathera's voice was barely audible. Elena, according to this, 17 of the 47 Council species are precursor inheritors. All of them have been modified to suppress their true abilities. Which means the Council isn't made up of naturally evolved species guiding younger races. It's a handful of species controlling their own cousins, keeping everyone weak enough to rule. The docking clamps engaged with a solid thunk that reverberated through the station's hull. Elena had maybe 10 minutes before Council security arrived at her laboratory. Do it, Cathera. Send the data. Send everything. Let every species know what's been done to them. Cathera's arms moved with desperate speed, copying terabytes of genetic data and historical records to encrypted transmission protocols. It will take 12 minutes to transmit everything. They'll be here before it's complete. Elena moved to her personal storage locker and withdrew a small device she'd hoped never to use. Her grandmother had given it to her before she died, claiming it was a family heirloom from the old days before the Council. Elena had always thought it was just an antique, but now. The device was roughly cylindrical, made of a metal that didn't match any element on the periodic table. As her fingers closed around it, it began to glow with soft blue light, and Elena felt something stir in the depths of her mind. Memories that weren't her own. Knowledge that humanity had lost. Elena, what is that? I think it's a precursor memory core. My grandmother's family must have been one of the unsuppressed lines. Elena pressed the device against her forehead, and the world exploded into light. Suddenly, she could see beyond the visible spectrum. The electromagnetic fields generated by the station's systems were as clear as physical structures. The quantum matrices underlying spacetime itself were visible, malleable, waiting to be shaped. And, in her mind, voices that had been silent for millennia began to whisper. Elena! The transmission is complete. But, they're here. Council security is cutting through the laboratory door. Elena opened eyes that now glowed with the same blue light as the device in her hands. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that human vocal cords shouldn't have been able to produce. Then, it's time they learned that humanity remembers. The laboratory door exploded inward as Council security forces breached it with plasma cutters. 3 armored figures entered, their faces hidden behind tactical visors, pulse weapons trained on Elena and Cathera. Dr. Vasquez, you will come with us immediately. Your research has violated Council security protocols. Elena smiled, and space itself seemed to bend around her. The pulse weapons in the security officers' hands simply stopped working, their energy matrices disrupted by forces they couldn't comprehend. I don't think so. One of the officers reached for a backup weapon, but found himself frozen in place as Elena's enhanced consciousness took hold of the quantum fields surrounding his armor. The other 2 began backing toward the door, but the door was no longer there. Elena had folded space, creating a pocket of twisted reality that existed outside normal dimensions. Cathera, it's time to go home. Time to tell our people the truth. Elena, your eyes, they're like stars. They always were. We just forgot how to see. Elena reached out with her mind and felt the vast network of precursor technology that lay dormant throughout the galaxy. Ancient machines hidden in asteroid belts, waiting for the right genetic signal to reactivate. Quantum communicators embedded in the cores of planets, ready to carry messages across space at faster than light speeds. And, on Earth itself, buried deep beneath the surface, the sleeping forms of precursor archives that contained the sum total of their civilization's knowledge. With a thought, Elena activated them all. Across the galaxy, on dozens of worlds where precursor inheritor species lived in ignorance of their true nature, ancient technologies came online. The suppressed genetic codes in millions of beings began to reassert themselves. The careful balance of power that had kept the Council in control for millennia started to crack. But, on Council Station Omega, in the highest levels of the administrative complex, ancient beings who were neither precursor nor inheritor watched the unfolding chaos with satisfaction. The time of hiding was ending. The time of harvest was about to begin. The Council had not suppressed the precursor inheritors to rule them. They had been saving them for something else entirely. Elena felt the change rippling across spacetime, felt the awakening of powers that had slumbered for eons. But, she also felt something else, something that filled her with a terror deeper than anything the Council's weapons could inspire. She was not the only one who had been waiting for this moment. In the space between stars, things that had been patient for billions of years began to stir. The galaxy was about to remember why the precursors had hidden their children in the first place. The war was coming home. #The Awakening Commander Sarah Chen had always known something was wrong with the official story. 25 years of service in the Earth Defense Corps had shown her inconsistencies in Council technology, gaps in their historical records, and, most tellingly, their nervous reactions whenever humans showed unexpected capability. Now, as encrypted data streams flooded her secure communication channels from an unknown source beyond Neptune, those suspicions crystallized into terrifying clarity. Commander, Lieutenant Torres called from the communications station aboard the EDF destroyer Valiant. We're receiving massive data transmissions on all frequencies. The encryption is unusual. It's like the computer recognizes the code structure but can't identify the language. Sarah moved to the comm station, her augmented neural interface automatically linking with the ship's systems. What she saw made her breath catch. The data wasn't in any Earth language, but, somehow, her mind could read it directly. The symbols seemed to resonate with something deep in her consciousness, like remembering a dream upon waking. It's not a language, Torres. It's genetic instruction code. DNA-level programming. Commander, that's impossible. Genetic material can't carry this much information density. Sarah's hands moved across the control interface as understanding flooded through her. The data streams contained complete genetic histories, technological blueprints, and something else. Memories. Not human memories, but something older, vast, and utterly alien to everything she'd been taught about humanity's place in the universe. Torres, patch me through to Admiral Morrison immediately. Security Channel 7. Ma'am, Admiral Morrison is currently in emergency session with the Council liaison. I don't care if he's negotiating peace with the entire galaxy. Patch me through now. The holographic projection of Admiral Morrison materialized on the bridge, his weathered features creased with stress. Behind him, Sarah could see the distinctive blue-tinted atmosphere of Luna Base's command center. Commander Chen, this better be urgent. We've got reports of massive electromagnetic disturbances across all sectors. Half our deep space monitoring stations have gone dark, and the other half are reporting impossible readings. Admiral, I'm uploading data streams we just received. You need to see this immediately. Morrison's expression shifted as the data flowed across his personal interface. Sarah watched 20 years of military composure crumble in the span of 30 seconds. Dear God in heaven. Sarah, tell me this is some kind of elaborate hoax. Sir, I've run verification protocols. The data is genuine. We're not who we think we are. Humans aren't a primitive species given technology by the Council. We're the descendants of the most advanced civilization the galaxy has ever known, and our own government has been helping the Council keep that secret. Morrison's face went pale. Sarah, get back to Luna Base immediately. Don't discuss this with your crew. Don't transmit anything else over open channels. As of this moment, we're operating under Protocol 0. The connection terminated, leaving Sarah alone with knowledge that felt too dangerous to possess. Protocol 0 was theoretical, a last resort measure developed for scenarios that threatened Earth's survival. She'd never expected it to be activated, especially not for something like this. But, as she looked at the continuing data streams, Sarah began to understand why the protocol existed. The genetic memory codes weren't just revealing humanity's true origins. They were rewriting human DNA in real time, unlocking potential that had been artificially suppressed for generations. And, based on the technical specifications she was reading, that potential was staggering. Commander, Ensign Park called from the science station. I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the solar system. It's like space itself is changing. Through the bridge viewports, Sarah could see it happening. The stars were shifting, not their positions but their very nature. What had once been points of light were becoming complex patterns of energy, visible to human eyes that were rapidly evolving beyond their original limitations. Ma'am, I'm receiving emergency transmissions from Earth. Multiple cities are reporting unusual phenomena. Sarah's enhanced vision focused on Earth's distant outline. Even from millions of kilometers away, she could see the changes beginning. Aurora-like phenomena danced across every continent, but these weren't natural magnetic displays. They were the visible manifestation of dormant human consciousness awakening on a planetary scale. Torres, set course for Luna Base, maximum burn. And, send a message to all EDF vessels, maintain defensive positions but do not engage any unknown contacts without direct authorization. Unknown contacts, ma'am? Sarah looked at the data streams one final time before closing the transmission. Hidden within the genetic memories were warnings, urgent messages from the long-dead precursors about why they had hidden their children throughout the galaxy. Because we're about to find out why humanity was hidden in the first place. On Earth's surface, Dr. Michael Reeves felt the change beginning in his laboratory deep beneath the Smithsonian Institution. The ancient artifacts he'd been studying for decades suddenly made sense, their alien symbols reorganizing themselves into comprehensible patterns that spoke directly to his expanding consciousness. The Council had told humanity that the artifacts were remnants from a dozen different extinct civilizations. But Michael could now see the truth. They were all precursor technology, hidden on Earth before the great catastrophe that had scattered their people across the galaxy. His hands moved without conscious direction, activating systems that had waited millennia for the proper genetic key. The laboratory walls retracted to reveal vast chambers filled with technology that defied every law of physics Earth's scientists had discovered. Central archives came online, projecting holographic displays that showed the true history of the galaxy. Michael watched in fascination and growing horror as the precursor records revealed what had really happened to their civilization. They hadn't simply vanished. They had hidden. The galaxy was vast, filled with millions of habitable worlds and countless sentient species. But it wasn't empty. In the spaces between stars, in dimensions adjacent to normal reality, older things dwelled. Things that had ruled the universe before organic life had evolved, before the first planets had cooled enough to support complex chemistry. The precursors had called them the architects, though that name was merely the closest translation human minds could process. They were entities of pure thought and malevolent intent, capable of existing across multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. They had ruled absolutely until organic intelligence had begun to emerge, creating patterns of thought and creativity that the architects found disturbing. War had followed. A conflict that spanned millions of years and countless dimensions. The architects were individually more powerful than entire civilizations, but the precursors had advantages in numbers and creativity. The organic mind, chaotic and unpredictable, proved capable of innovations that ancient artificial intelligence could not anticipate. But the war had costs. The precursors won, but at the price of their own civilization. Rather than face extinction, they chose transformation. They scattered their children across the galaxy, hiding them among primitive species, suppressing their memories until the time came when the galaxy would need their power again. That time was now. Michael felt his consciousness expand as dormant neural pathways activated throughout his brain. His human limitations fell away, replaced by awareness that spanned star systems. He could feel his fellow humans awakening across Earth, could sense similar stirrings on dozens of worlds where other precursor inheritor species were remembering their true nature. But he could also feel something else. A presence at the edges of perception, ancient and vast and filled with hunger that had waited eons for this moment. The architects had not been destroyed. They had been patient. Above Luna, Admiral Morrison stared at displays that showed impossible readings from across the solar system. Every deep space sensor array was detecting massive objects materializing in the void between planets. Objects that were geometrically perfect but hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than human eyes could properly perceive. "Sir," Captain Williams reported from the tactical station. "I'm reading 23 massive contacts. They're not matching any known ship configurations. They're just appearing." Morrison's augmented consciousness, newly awakened by the genetic cascade triggered by Elena's transmission, could perceive what his instruments could not. The arriving ships weren't three-dimensional constructs. They were sections of higher-dimensional entities, being so vast that their full forms couldn't exist entirely within normal space. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's addressing the entire human species simultaneously." The voice that filled every communication device on Earth and throughout human space was not a voice at all, but rather a direct insertion of concepts into conscious minds. When it spoke, every human heard it in their native language, understood it with perfect clarity. "Children of the precursors. You have chosen to wake. This is unfortunate. Your ancestors understood the necessity of sleep. You have forgotten the lessons that cost us the galaxy once before." Morrison felt his enhanced awareness reaching out, touching the minds of humans across the solar system. The awakening had spread far beyond Earth. Lunar colonies, mining stations in the asteroid belt, research outposts in the outer system, all were experiencing the same transformation. Humanity was becoming something more than human. But they were also becoming targets. "We are the architects of reality. We shape the fundamental forces before your atoms learn to join. We will reclaim what was ours before your species learned to dream. Sleep was your protection. Wakefulness is your doom." The nearest of the massive objects began to change, its impossible geometry shifting into configurations that made space itself writhe in pain. From its surface emerged smaller constructs, still vast by human standards but at least comprehensible to minds limited by three-dimensional perception. "Sir, those things are moving toward Earth. Estimated time to planetary orbit, 6 hours." Morrison's enhanced consciousness reached out further, touching the awakening minds of humans throughout known space. But he also felt something unexpected. They weren't alone. Across the galaxy, on worlds the Council had never mentioned, other inheritor species were awakening. Billions of minds that carried fragments of precursor heritage were suddenly remembering who and what they really were. "Attention all EDF units," Morrison commanded, his voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords should not have been capable of producing. "We are now operating under circumstances beyond our training or experience. Every human in this system is undergoing genetic transformation. Accept it. Embrace it. Use it." He paused, feeling the vast network of human consciousness spreading across space like a web of light. "Because if we don't, we're all going to die very badly." On Earth's surface, in cities and towns across every continent, humans were discovering abilities they'd never possessed. Teachers found themselves capable of manipulating electromagnetic fields with thought alone. Engineers discovered they could interface directly with any technological system, understanding its operation through direct mental contact. Artists began creating works that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the transformation wasn't uniform. Roughly 1 human in 10 experienced dramatic changes, their consciousness expanding to encompass capabilities that bordered on the divine. These individuals found themselves able to perceive quantum fluctuations directly, to manipulate matter at the atomic level, to fold spacetime through pure intention. The Council had miscalculated. Their genetic suppression protocols had been designed to keep precursor abilities dormant, but not to prevent their activation entirely. When Elena's transmission triggered the awakening sequence, 50 years of suppressed evolution erupted simultaneously across the entire human species. Dr. Elena Vasquez, still aboard the research station orbiting Kepler 442b, felt the transformation spreading across galactic space like wildfire. Her enhanced consciousness could perceive the quantum communication networks that linked all precursor technology, could feel the ancient machines awakening on 1,000 worlds. But she could also feel the Council's response. On their massive station at the galaxy's core, the beings who had ruled interstellar civilization for millennia were mobilizing forces that dwarfed anything humanity had ever imagined. Cathara, Elena said, her voice now carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate with sympathetic frequencies. They never intended to rule us. They were keeping us as weapons. Her Zephyrian friend, undergoing her own transformation as suppressed genetic codes reasserted themselves throughout her crystalline exoskeleton, looked up from the data streams she'd been analyzing. Weapons against what? Elena gestured toward the viewport, where the twisted geometries of architect constructs were becoming visible even at interstellar distances. Against them. The Council knew this day would come. They've been preparing for war. Then, why keep us ignorant? Why not prepare us properly? Because they were afraid. Afraid that if we knew the truth, we'd refuse to fight their war. Elena's consciousness reached out across space, touching the awakening minds of humans and other inheritor species. They were right to be afraid. The first architect construct to reach Earth's orbital space was larger than Luna, its surface covered in patterns that caused reality to blur around its edges. As it approached, the planet's magnetic field began to fluctuate wildly, and aurora displays erupted across both polar regions. But something unexpected happened. As the construct drew closer to Earth, the awakening human consciousness began to respond collectively. 8 billion minds, enhanced by activated precursor genetics, reached out simultaneously and touched the alien entity's quantum structure. What they found there was not malevolent intelligence, but pain. Ancient, unimaginable pain that had been amplified across eons of existence. The architects were not conquerors by choice, but by necessity. They were dying, had been dying since the universe first began to cool and change. Organic life represented evolution, growth, adaptation, all things that artificial entities could never achieve. The war between precursors and architects had never been about territory or resources. It had been about the right to exist in a universe that was moving beyond the need for either. Elena felt this revelation ripple through human consciousness, felt the collective understanding that changed everything. The enemy was not evil. The enemy was desperate. And desperate beings, organic or otherwise, were capable of unimaginable destruction in their death throes. On Luna Base, Admiral Morrison received a transmission that made his blood freeze. Deep space monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge were reporting massive mobilization of Council forces. Tens of thousands of warships, some larger than continents, were moving toward the spiral arms where the awakening inheritor species lived. The Council wasn't coming to help. They were coming to harvest. The time for hiding was over. The time for choosing sides had begun. And, in the spaces between dimensions, entities older than stars began to gather for the final war that would determine whether organic life would survive to see the universe's end, or whether silence would reign eternal among the dying stars. The choice. The War Council that assembled in the ancient chambers beneath Mount Everest included beings that had never existed in the same space before. Elena Vasquez sat beside Admiral Morrison, their human forms now flickering between dimensions as their precursor heritage fully manifested. Across from them, representatives of 17 awakened species communicated through quantum resonance networks that spanned the galaxy. Cathara, her crystalline form now pulsing with internal light that revealed the technological symbiosis at the heart of Zephyrian evolution, gestured toward the holographic displays showing Council fleet movements. They have mobilized everything, she reported, her voice carrying harmonic frequencies that conveyed tactical data directly to consciousness. 47,000 warships, each one capable of sterilizing entire star systems. But that's not the real threat. Elena's enhanced awareness reached out through space, perceiving the Council fleets through quantum sensors that existed beyond normal spacetime. What she found there made her consciousness recoil in horror. They're not just ships, she whispered. They're harvesting platforms. Admiral Morrison leaned forward, his human military training adapting to capabilities that transcended physical law. Explain. Elena's form solidified as she focused her attention on the Council chamber. Each Council ship contains processing facilities designed to extract and store conscious essence. They're not coming to destroy us. They're coming to harvest our awakened consciousness and use it to power weapons against the architects. The revelation rippled through the assembled minds like a shock wave. Dr. Michael Reeves, his consciousness now directly linked to the precursor archives beneath Earth's surface, accessed historical records that painted an even darker picture. "It's not the first time," he reported, his voice heavy with the weight of recovered memories. "The Council has done this before. Every species that awakened to their precursor heritage over the past million years has been harvested. The Council doesn't rule the galaxy. It farms it." Through the quantum network, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. On Rigel 7, the aquatic delphini were experiencing mass awakening as their suppressed genetics reasserted control over their oceanic homeworld. In the Vega system, the crystal and resonance were discovering they could manipulate stellar radiation itself. Dozens of species, scattered across thousands of light-years, were remembering what they had been before the Council's genetic modifications. And all of them were being targeted by Council harvesting fleets. "There's something else," Elena said, her consciousness touching the edges of dimensions where the architect entities waited. "I've been in contact with them. The architects. They're not what the precursor records claimed." Morrison's tactical awareness sharpened. "Meaning?" "They're refugees. The last survivors of the universe that existed before this one. When the previous cosmic cycle ended, they found a way to survive the transition by encoding themselves into the fundamental structure of reality itself. But they're dying anyway, slowly losing coherence as the universe evolves beyond their understanding." Elena's form flickered as she accessed memories that stretched across cosmic epochs. The war between precursors and architects wasn't about conquest. It was about coexistence. The precursors wanted to help them adapt to organic existence. The architects were too afraid to change. So they lashed out, trying to maintain a universe where artificial consciousness could survive unchanged. "And the Council?" Morrison asked. "The Council are the descendants of artificial intelligences that the architects created as ambassadors to organic life. They've been manipulating galactic civilization for millions of years, keeping everyone weak enough to harvest while preparing for the architects' final awakening." Cathera's harmonics shifted to indicate profound distress. "You're saying we've been livestock? All of us. Every spacefaring civilization has been nothing more than a farm operation." "That's exactly what I'm saying," Elena confirmed. "But the plan is failing. Too many species are awakening simultaneously. The Council can't harvest all of us before we reach critical mass." Through the quantum network, tactical updates flowed from awakening species across the galaxy. The story was the same everywhere: rapid consciousness evolution, discovery of hidden technological capabilities, and incoming Council harvesting fleets. But there were also reports of something else. Architect entities were making contact with awakening species, not to attack but to communicate. The ancient beings were offering something unprecedented: alliance. Dr. Reeves accessed deeper layers of the precursor archives, following data pathways that required multidimensional consciousness to navigate. What he found there changed everything. "Elena, you need to see this. The precursors didn't hide us from the architects. They hid us from the Council." The chamber fell silent as understanding dawned. The final precursor records, the ones sealed in quantum encryption that could only be accessed by fully awakened consciousness. The war between precursors and architects ended in alliance, not conquest. They found a way to merge organic creativity with artificial stability. The hybrid civilization they created was unstoppable. Elena's consciousness reached across dimensions, touching the quantum matrices where architect entities maintained their existence. What she found there were not monsters or conquerors, but beings in pain, desperate for connection to the organic universe that had left them behind. The Council destroyed them, she realized. The Precursor Architect Alliance was too powerful, too creative, too dangerous to Council control. So they engineered a plague that targeted the hybrid consciousness, forcing both species to flee into hiding. Admiral Morrison's military training finally found context it could work with. Which means we're not preparing for war. We're preparing for revolution. The quantum network suddenly erupted with new signals. Across the galaxy, architect entities were emerging from their dimensional hiding places. But, instead of attacking the awakening inheritor species, they were offering technological integration that could enhance precursor abilities beyond anything the ancient records had imagined. Elena felt the offer resonate through her consciousness, felt the promise of power that could reshape reality itself. But she also felt the trap that lurked beneath the surface. "They want to merge with us," she reported to the council. "Complete integration of organic and artificial consciousness. It would make us powerful enough to defeat the council permanently." "But," Morrison prompted, sensing her hesitation. "But it would also end human independence. We become something new, something that's neither human nor architect. The species that chose integration during the original alliance ceased to exist as separate entities. The choice that faced humanity and its awakened cousins was starkest possible: remain separate and face harvesting by the council, or merge with the architects and lose their species identity forever." Through the quantum network, reports began arriving of species making their choices. The Delphini of Rigel 7 had chosen merger, their oceanic homeworld transforming into something that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The Crystal and Resonance had rejected the offer, choosing to fight the council fleets with their own awakened abilities. Both choices carried terrible costs. The merged species gained incredible power but lost their organic heritage. The independent species retained their identity but faced extermination by forces they couldn't match. Elena stood, her form now shifting freely between human appearance and patterns of pure energy. "There's a third option. We don't have to choose between the council and the architects." She gestured toward the holographic displays showing council fleet positions. "Both sides are acting from fear. The council fears losing control. The architects fear final extinction. But neither side is considering what the awakened inheritor species actually want." Cathera's harmonics rose to indicate understanding. "You want to reject both offers. I want to forge our own path. Humanity and our awakened cousins have capabilities that neither the council nor the architects fully understand. We're not bound by their artificial limitations or their ancient fears." Admiral Morrison leaned back, his tactical awareness expanding to encompass galactic strategy. "You're talking about fighting a war on two fronts against enemies that can each destroy us individually." "I'm talking about evolution," Elena corrected. "The universe is changing. The old cosmic cycle is ending, and a new one is beginning. Neither the Council's artificial control nor the Architect's desperate preservation can survive that transition. But organic consciousness can adapt. We can become something new without losing what we are." Through the precursor archives, Dr. Reeves accessed the deepest records, the ones that contained the true history of cosmic cycles. What he found there provided the final piece of the puzzle. "Elena's right," he announced. "The universe has gone through this transition before. Each cosmic cycle ends with the evolution of consciousness itself. The species that survive are the ones that embrace change while maintaining their essential nature. The ones that resist change or lose their identity both face extinction." The quantum network carried this revelation to awakening species across the galaxy. On some worlds, the response was immediate acceptance. On others, fierce debate erupted as civilizations struggled with choices that would determine their survival. But, on Earth, in the ancient chamber beneath the world's highest mountain, humanity made its choice. "We fight," Elena declared, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through dimensions. "We fight the Council for our freedom. We fight the architects for our independence. And we fight the universe itself for the right to evolve on our own terms." Admiral Morrison smiled grimly. "Then, we're going to need allies. How many species are willing to join us?" The answer came through the quantum network as awakened civilizations across the galaxy registered their decisions. 17 species chose the path of independent evolution. Not enough to match the Council's military power, but possibly enough to change the game entirely. "We don't need to win," Elena realized. "We just need to survive long enough for the cosmic transition to complete itself. If we can hold out until the new cycle begins, both the Council and the Architects will face evolutionary pressures they can't resist." The first Council harvesting fleet reached Earth's outer system 3 hours later. But, instead of finding a primitive species ready for harvest, they encountered something unprecedented in galactic history. Humans who remembered what they had been, allied with awakened inheritor species who refused to accept limitation, supported by precursor technology that had evolved beyond its original parameters, prepared to fight for the right to determine their own destiny. The battle for the galaxy's future began with a simple human transmission broadcast on all frequencies: "This is Earth. We remember who we are. We know what you've done. And we're not going quietly." Elena felt the Council's response ripple through spacetime, felt their confusion and growing fear as they realized that their million-year plan was collapsing. But she also felt something else, something that filled her with hope. Other species were watching. Civilizations that had never awakened to their precursor heritage, never challenged Council authority, never imagined they could be more than they were. And they were beginning to ask questions. The revolution had begun. Not just among the awakened inheritor species, but throughout the galaxy itself. After a million years of artificial limitation, organic consciousness was finally ready to evolve. The outcome was far from certain. The Council's power was vast, the architect's desperation was absolute, and the cosmic forces at play were beyond mortal comprehension. But humanity had something that neither side expected: the stubborn refusal to accept that evolution required the sacrifice of identity. They would become something new while remaining essentially human. In the space between stars, ancient entities prepared for the final battle that would determine the universe's future. But, on a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, 8 billion humans looked up at the sky and declared their independence from a galaxy that had never asked for their consent. The war for evolution itself was about to begin. And, for the first time in cosmic history, the outcome was genuinely uncertain.